Hi everyone, I'm Katie Willis and I took up a new hobby over quarantine, and that is watercolor painting. And I decided to create a video, and we'll see if I do more, I don't know, but a video of me doing one of my favorite processes, which is spontaneous painting. And I've enjoyed watching spontaneous painting on YouTube, and so I thought, oh, why not? I'm gonna make my own video. So I hope that you enjoy this and learn something from it. I'm just gonna say right now, I've never done one of these before, so it's not going to be professional quality, but I learned a lot doing it. So the next one, if I do another, it'll be like leaps and bounds better. But here's the video of spontaneous painting, and I hope that you enjoy. I find this painting like a really good way just to warm up or just to do something fun and different. As you'll see in a minute when I get started, there's no photo that I'm referring to. It's just all comes from my imagination, basically. And I love to do this. And I learned it from watching a YouTuber whose name totally slips me right now, but his channel is called The Mind of Watercolor. And he mainly does a lot of landscape art, and he just has so many great videos. So if you're interested in learning more about watercolor or different processes, or even just how color works and what happens when you blend certain colors together, or how to do shading with watercolor, I mean, he's got everything on his channel. So I recommend checking out The Mind of Watercolor. But here's something that I learned from him. Actually, I just did this today. Was to take some basic colors. There was about maybe 8 colors that he had, and I didn't have all the same colors that he has, but I was able to find, I had most of them, and then a few I had to substitute for close colors. And then you can figure out some basic color palettes that you might want to use in your painting by seeing what happens when they bleed together. So for today's, I'm not really going to go into this too much, but for today's spontaneous painting, I've decided to use this one. You can't really tell because it bled all the way down, but this is actually a red. It'll have like, kind of starts out this color. But you can see that with red, royal blue, and then this, you can see the edge here, that's the green gold. It looks kind of like this. You end up with various greens when you blend it with blue. You end up with purples here. And even if I look, like, let's see, green gold mixed with the red is right here, I should be able to also get some oranges out of it. So I should be able to do a lot of color with just these 3. When I get to the detail work, I may end up adding like some gray or a little bit of brown, but we'll see. I won't know until I get started, but these will be the 3 main colors that I use at the beginning. So let me get started. The process of spontaneous painting is, first I'm going to start with just plopping color on the page without not much of a plan. As I'm plopping color down, I might start to think like, oh, I can see that there might be trees over here, or I can see water might go here. And so then as I'm plopping color, I might start to think through that as I'm going. But like I said, I'm not working from any inspiration photo or anything like that. I'm just going to let the watercolor do what watercolor does, and see what I can make out of it. Okay, so in this time lapse, I'm putting the color wash down. I'm using a lot of water. You can see I started with the blue to the red to the yellow, and I want to allow them to really blend and mix. You'll notice I tilt my paper different directions during this process, and I just want the water to run. I use that squirt bottle, that mister, to create little effects of speckles and to make it a little wetter so that water will run. I'll even drag my a wet paintbrush underneath paint, because paint will flow to where the water is. So it just causes it to even go other directions as it catches into the water. Okay, so I have finished the wash. We'll just call it the color wash for the background. Let it dry. Had some lunch. There's a couple things I did while it was drying that weren't recorded. One was I sprayed this side again with the mister, and you can see what that does is it kind of, I don't know, it causes the paint to react a little bit, so it looks a little fuzzy, which helps with kind of the look of bushes or foliage or whatever. And the other thing I did is I splattered some big drops of water, and you can see those. Some of them are still drying, but like here, you can see how they react. Sorry, oh, fingers. How it reacts with the paint, and so you get sometimes you get this like almost spider webby effect. It kind of depends on how wet the paper is at the moment and all of that, but again, it just causes a reaction to happen and offers more cool opportunities for something to do with those areas. But it's still drying, and that's okay. I'm still going to go ahead and start painting over it. Okay, so as I looked at this picture, I felt like I was really seeing a mountain in the background. So you can see that I'm adding a little bit more to that back, and then using darker blue to sort of give shape to that mountain and depth. And that's really what I'm doing in this part of the process is I'm just going to add more of the yellow, the blue, and the red to bring out some more of the shapes that I'm seeing as I play around with this painting. And some of it's really subtle, some of it may stand out more. It's one of those things that evolves as you go. So you can see that I'm adding more shadow to the base there. That purple section I'm working on, I love when you get those deep tones. That could end up being rocks. That could end up being shadow. It could be the negative space behind trees. It just kind of depends on how your paint ends up flowing. So I'm just adding more color, blending, allowing the color again to bleed and mix and sort of force a picture, or at least it helps me see a picture beginning to evolve. And now I'm using my fine liner my fine liner brush to add some small details. I'm adding some trees. To me, it looks like trees are kind of coming out of that mountain a little bit. So I'm just using some little details to pull out maybe some bushes here, some tree lines, just giving hints of what might be there. I used some pieces of paper towel there to remove some paint, which is another little trick. It helps create depth, or if you made a little boo-boo, you can pull watercolor up while it's wet. It's not totally erasable, but it helps. And again, just trying to add some of these small details that are really going to make this scene stand out more, make rocks start to look like rocks, trees start to look a little more like trees. You'll notice I added some sand or little rocks in the sand there to indicate a sandy area. But this part, I mean, I could just spend so long just adding detail after detail, and at some point you have to tell yourself to stop. But this is fun. This is where you really get to get in there and work your magic. Oh, that was splatter painting. I splattered some color on there that just gives some movement. Okay, so my painting has dried, and I've decided I'm not going to do any more to it. I think it's not my favorite one I've done, but I think it was a really good practice in color blending. I only use those 3 colors. I never went back to doing, I didn't pull out any browns or blacks or greens. Anything that you see is green, I actually mixed the blue and the green gold color that I was using together to make that green. Same with the orange was the red and the gold mixed together. So everything here was done with only 3 colors. I did a lot of the mixing just by, you saw, touching it on the paper and letting them blend there. But I did actually, at one point, let's see if I can get my palette over here. This is the blue and the gold, and this is the red and the gold green gold, that to make those two colors. Oops, that didn't show, sorry. I'm having to look at this things backwards, so it's a little funny. But again, I only use my 3 colors. So, and actually you can see here I did a little red and blue mixture as well. So you don't need a ton of paints in order to create your colors. Although I will admit that I do have a lot of paint colors because sometimes I don't want to have to think about it. I just want to find purple. So anyway, but this was a good practice for what happens when I do this with this color. So I'm happy with it in that sense. This is only I think the 4th painting, spontaneous painting I've ever done. So a couple days ago is when I decided I'd give it a shot. This was my very first one. So there's a little less going on in terms of all the paint all over it, but you can see too, it was somewhat of a limited palette. And this was done 100% watercolor, no pen or ink on it. I really kind of like it. Again, it was an experiment, my first one. So this one, the trees are much closer up than in the one I just did. And then let's see what's after that. The next one was my first wash or watercolor with ink. So you can see the details there are done with permanent ink. So I could do watercolor over the top of them again. So there's several steps that happen, just like in the one that I just did. Lots of layering that happens. And in this case, I can do pen, then watercolor, then pen, then watercolor. I just have to wait for things to dry. But if you use permanent ink, you have that flexibility. So that was the second one. And then I did this one last night. This is another, get it closer to this is another pen and ink and watercolor. Pen and ink is just ink and watercolor. This one's a little more, I kind of dig this one. It's a little more, I don't know, doodly maybe is a way to describe it. My ink lines aren't as detailed, and it leaves a little more to the imagination, but I really like it, and I kind of like this, how this little pond part turned out here. I didn't end up doing any paint splatter on this one, so that's how it's different a little bit. And then this was messing around with color. So yeah, the idea too, especially when you do just straight watercolor and no ink, but even with ink, is with spontaneous painting, you don't want to detail everything. It's called being detail drunk. You don't want to get detail drunk. So you want to leave stuff to the imagination. So in this, you get the idea that there's a mountain back there. You get the idea that there's maybe clusters of trees going up the mountain. You get the idea of maybe some bushes, rocks, like pebbles in the sand. This kind of reminded me of a cave, and probably what I should have done is paint that really, really dark in there, but that's okay. So that's why you don't see everything detailed out, because you leave some stuff to the imagination, especially with watercolor. So I hope you enjoyed my very first watercolor video, amateur artist, amateur videographer. I hope to do more.